Howdy, stranger. Uh, I'm moving on. What I mean by that is I am leaving the area that I've been in for most of my life and a place where I always feel like I've been stuck. For the most part, this was caused by Scientology and by extension, my parents, who, up until I spoke out against the church, had been meticulously attempting to reinforce that my only foundation was supporting Scientology, or they would ensure that my life would be made a lot harder. Well, I think they probably would have preferred, it seems, that I would have offed myself um, rather than spoken out about Scientology, their affiliations, abuses, etc. So it's not hard to see why I would not be as resistant to allow the disconnection I knew would follow. Although I do know that there are a handful of Dr. Berg fans out there who are hesitant to believe my claims, mostly because they have an intense distrust for the medical industry. And he was a voice to echo their views in a confirmation bias vacuum. By defend, I mean viciously attack me online without any hesitation, because my dad, Dr. Berg, has literally become like a mini cult leader of his own. I don't I don't care about these voices too much, because statistically too many people had lead in their water growing up, so I can't expect logic to flow from the rafters in this area. It doesn't bother me that these people are already in this cult of personality. It's just sort of on top of the Scientology layer. I have these sort of unhinged lunatics who are kind of coming after me for misrepresenting someone they do not even know. I've been contacted by many Scientologists who tell me I've committed a terrible crime for harming my father's reputation, even before I gave any details beyond he's in Scientology and he donates millions of dollars. You would think to a Scientologist this would be great. But that was one of the biggest reasons I was disconnected. Because even to Scientologists, and this validated sort of my views at the time, even to Scientologists, it is harmful for people to know you are in Scientology. Who knows if I'll cut those. Scientology is a sickness that perpetuates the ever too common cult allowance and apologist nature that exists everywhere in America. The idea that these groups should be vaguely defined and disregarded is just an act of omission to protect the religious interests in the eyes of this country's most zealous leaders. They need these groups to exist to make their own seem normal and not so crazy, and to some degree even more believable in comparison to the asinine beliefs and practices by groups like Scientology. Now, there's a common misunderstanding about the definition of the word cult. Now, even in Scientology, you are allowed to look up the definition of cult, but because they pick and choose only specific dictionaries that you're allowed to use, usually you'll get them to come to a conclusion that a cult is just some sort of veneration or devotion to a particular figure or belief system, excessive admiration for a particular person, thing, idea, etc. This leaves out the somewhat clinical discernation between a cult classic movie, something that a lot of people flock towards, like Back to the Future, something like that. The difference is in how it manifests in action, okay? It's not about your beliefs, all right? A cult is a religious or quasi-religious group characterized by unusual or atypical beliefs, seclusion from the outside world, an authoritarian structure. Cults tend to be highly cohesive, well-organized, secretive, and hostile to non-members. This is the us versus them mentality. This is the I'm a Scientologist, so I know the secrets of the universe, and therefore I am better than the average person. Okay, this is the only reason Scientology didn't work is because you didn't apply it properly. Now, go to ethics. We have a program waiting for you. And it may even make sense to you that protecting your religious beliefs is the solution. But you must understand that it has almost nothing to do with what you believe. Like I said earlier, what your group does in defense of its beliefs is everything. Okay? We're tracking so far? Good. You know, you can play dumb and you can lie, but that rarely stops others from asking rational questions that you should be ready to answer honestly, if you're the kind of person who wants to live with the truth. Okay? Yet it's almost clockwork. The amount of times I've seen Scientology and Scientologists, some that I know personally, run and hide from the truth and lie, almost pathologically. Okay? Have I been fair gamed? Yes. Personal harassment, attempts to gain my information via scam emails, pretending to be sponsors that want to pay me to do videos. Hell, my old Facebook account was mysteriously deleted. Unsurprisingly, it was an account that had over 100 friends that were all Scientologists. So I assume that this was some kind of quench the fire before it spreads situation. Does that make sense? That's just how I perceived it when it happened, because I couldn't even log in. It was just like, nope, this has been reported into oblivion. You are no longer allowed to see it. This email is blah, blah, blah. Never saw it again. And I do get a lot of hateful comments from Scientologists, which I expected because of the intrinsic makeup of Scientology as a belief system. Makes them very prone to zealous hatred of anyone who questions L. Ron Hubbard, David Miscavige, or even their precious technology. And it's nothing I didn't expect, but it definitely confirms just about every realization about the toxicity and harmful nature of the cult, and even about the extent of my family's indoctrination and how it's way stronger than any family dynamic that has ever existed there. So I've been through the ringer for the past 2 years, and thankfully, I started therapy, which I recommend all of you do. I was able to sort out a lot, and it stabilized me rather quickly. And after that, I've been gradually realizing that I am more than my experience with Scientology. I am on my own. So I know you're probably thinking now, wait, you're not going to make any Scientology videos anymore? No, I'll admit that was a little bit of clickbait, although I will continue to make that kind of content, mainly because until they lose their tax exemption, we need all the help we can get in getting justice for those who have been hurt in so many ways by Scientology. So to that extent, I will continue to give y'all the content that you've come to expect from me. And some of it's I've scripted beforehand. Some of it will, I'm sure most of it won't be scripted, but it's just, I'd like to pepper in some of my other interests here and there. So I'm opening myself up to making whatever kind of content I want. And maybe I'll make it next week, next month, next year, whenever. But I am my own person, and I am not confined to the semantics and schemed of the cult that groomed and trafficked me. My whole life, my foundations have been more or less rooted in falling back on my parents and submitting to Scientology when I was too burnt out or too depressed to find my own way. That person who I thought I was back then had a lot of deficiencies, socially, mentally, and emotionally overall. I was brainwashed with the idea that the WOG world, the non-Scientology world, is going to destroy you and consume you, and you can't trust anyone who isn't a Scientologist because they don't use LRH tech, and the only workable and ethical group in the universe is Scientology. In the universe. Those were the stakes. I was an infinitely old being fighting a war that is 1 trillion years old. This is the deep indoctrination at play. I was also made to believe that it's impossible to be a victim because you cause everything bad to happen, so you're fucked either way. Pressured from all sides to either succeed in Scientology or to lose everything I've ever known with no backup or safety net. I would travel to a different state with the hope I can make it on my own, face consecutive failures because my only priority has been in a Scientology mindset, and then I end up back home where I'm bargaining for help by doing Scientology courses, subjecting myself to humiliating ethics programs for the smallest indiscretions and being made into a pathetic puppet for my parents' arrogant pride in their space opera cult. Okay? You still with me here? I had enough. And now the smoke is cleared, and I'm leaving that all behind. And traveled far away from that fucked up place I felt I was doomed to end up in again. Whoever I was back then is dead. And if you knew me back then and you're watching this now, the Ian you think you knew is long gone. Many of you made me terrified to have original or even just my own thoughts. And I've never felt more free now to find out who I want to be and to do the things that I want to do. This world is bigger and more alive than I had known before. It's hard to really care about human life or suffering when you're raised to believe that people deserve the suffering they get because they cause it. Babies are responsible for their abuse by their parents. Sexual assault victims are at fault for their abusers' actions. Why should I care if they caused it? My reflection of this thinking was somewhat of a catalyst for the empathy I had to learn to leave Scientology. So in some ways, I believe it was inevitable. I was going to leave or give up on Scientology because I felt too much for people, and I just cared too much for their pain. And doing more Scientology pushed that button. When you're trained in Scientology, you come across something called the Auditor's Code. And it's what every auditor uses, and it's what's held against Scientologists as this moral code of handling people as a Scientologist. And one of the points in the Auditor's Code is do not be sympathetic, be effective. Now, despite the fact that Scientology is neither effective or sympathetic, if you're inspired by a cause you've been led to believe is just, you can convince yourself that any amount of cruelty can be justified to aid the ethical group. Your definitions change, and you're blind to the irrational nature of your actions. You ignore pain you cause in others and become numb to it because you're helping the most ethical group. You are perpetuating good by doing bad. And you don't even realize it. So I'm done mourning my dead self. I'm a new person, and I am free. Now, if you're in Scientology now, I strongly recommend you look at the facts. Okay? Rethink the reasons why management maybe doesn't want you reading the news. How many times can you be told they're all just lies when you see less and less people in the orgs, less and less people on course? It's harder and harder to get people into auditing. When you see famous Scientologists going to prison for heinous crimes or being investigated for fraud. The reality is not your certainty about Scientology, and that is a very hard pill to swallow. I understand. I'm not going to force feed that to you because this is a conversation you're going to have with yourself, speaking to a Scientologist who might be watching this. Reality does not lie in your certainty about Scientology. Okay? It lies in the real-world effects Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, and COB has had throughout the world. Most of these effects are quite negative, and there is never any accountability. You would think that a group that preaches responsibility endlessly to be able to take even the smallest amount of it, but no. Scientology has never, even with the most obvious, like minor, tiny transgressions, have never taken responsibility for anything, a period. Never has Scientology admitted it has done a wrong in its existence. And that's a red flag for any person walking this earth. But somehow it's not when it's your group. Do you see how self-serving that thought is? That mindset, how that mindset alone might be more palatable and calming to you because you can continue to have trust and put faith in this thing. You don't have to face any discomfort in your beliefs. These confirming understandings of, oh, Scientology does nothing wrong, well, that's just soothing you. It's comfortable for you to believe that, so you do. And that's about as the extent of it. You don't need proof. You just need it to come down the line. You just need whoever's above you to say, we're doing nothing wrong. But there is a way out of this, where it does not ruin your life. I found leaving Scientology to change my life in some of the best ways, some of the most important and necessary ways to continue my interest in being around. I'll just say it like that. I'm just a guy who, after picking himself back up, wants to help others do the same. So that's the update from me. I am all moved into my new place, and I feel literally better than I ever have in my entire life of crippling depression. I see life is good and worth living. And if I can do it, hell, so can you. Till next time.
Peace.